All right, here we go. We are almost done with the book of Exodus, Exodus chapters 38 and 39 today. A lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be some review, but there's some new stuff mixed in there, just kind of like last week was review with some new stuff mixed in. As Moses is doing the recap of the commandments and the vows between God and the Israelites at Exodus chapter 20, which we call the Ten Commandments, right? So, he's basically saying, I'm going to take you to be my people from the Exodus promise in Exodus 6. And then in 19, they meet at the mountain, getting ready to join together. And in 20, the first thing he says is, don't cheat on me. Don't cheat on me. Don't have any other gods except for me. So he's given these vows. It's like wedding vows, And then he says, this is how you interact with me. And then here's how you guys interact with each other, even. And that's what the other six, the first four are how you interact with God. And the last six of the Ten Commandments are how you interact with others. And then after that, if you'll remember, he talked about servants or slaves, indentured servant, bond servants, whatever. They have rights. They're not just trash. They're actually human beings made in the image of God as well. And they have rights. So here's their rights. And that's the first time that we see that written in any culture, that slaves and servants have any sort of rights. It's normally just you can kill them, you can beat them, you can whatever, right? So we have the rights, and then it talks about, hey, now I want you to build a place. Now it's going to have to be mobile because you guys are wandering around the desert. They don't know they're going to be out there for 40 years, but they're out in the desert. You're going to be out here, and this thing's got to be mobile, so I can go with you.
Do we know why he chose the Israelites?
We don't.
You ever thought about that?
Well, it goes all the way back to Abram.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
Yeah, because if you even go to that study, it's like he just handpicked Abraham.
He did.
Because Abraham's father, this is not in the Bible, but Abraham's dad, he was an idol maker.
Correct.
He made idols.
That's what I gathered as well.
From Abraham out of the blue,
yeah,
that's basically what it was.
Yeah.
But yet he saw something in his heart.
Well, and on top of that, there's nothing then that Abraham could say, oh, well, I was a good person, or I was given lots of money, or there was nothing notable about him. So there was nothing that earned God's favor in his life.
The only thing I think that we know from archaeology about Abraham's childhood is that he did go to school, which they call a tablet house. And you know that kind of writing that you were the punching, clay thing that the kids all had?
Yeah.
They had tablet houses back then.
Mm-hmm.
And they believed that Abraham attended that tablet house.
Probably.
But, yeah, he saw something in Abraham.
Yeah. And then he did things to and with and for Abraham that only God could do. It was not because Abraham was perfect. Nope, he did this.
Yeah.
It wasn't because he didn't sin. No, he did that. It wasn't because he was totally faithful with his wife. No, he slept with Hagar. Like, there's all these things where Abraham continues to get the X marks next to his accolades, to his things. But at the end of the day, it was all God. And that's the same thing with the Israelites, right? It's all him. There's nothing that the Israelites did. They weren't saying, hey, God, we're worshiping you. We're really imploring your name. We're really desiring you. They were stubborn. And God's dragging them kicking and screaming through the desert. That's basically what's happening, right? So here we are. He says, make a mobile place to worship me. Here's how you do it. Make the priestly garments, make the ark, make it all the things, the altar for sacrificing and burning the animals for the sin, and all the things, right? What we've been talking about. And then he tells the people, so that's where we are now, this last couple of chapters here, is Moses now telling the people, here's what God told me. We heard the conversation between him and God. Now we're hearing the conversation between Moses and the people. And then we see the people's reaction. Remember, last week we talked about the fact that they were giving. Remember, we need porpoise skins and bronze and gold and fine linen and all these things. And remember what the workmen, the craftsmen, what they say? Moses, can you let the people know to just
no more? Stop bringing.
We're done. We've got too much stuff. The tithes and offerings are overflowing. We don't need any more. And again, I've never heard that in a church before. But wouldn't that be amazing if that happened?
You got enough here. Bring the rest over to Bradford's house.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I said about the Romney cards. They need a place to hide money.
Yeah, exactly. So we are in chapter 38, which is a continuation of the craftsmen and the people of the Israelites. They are in the process of crafting and making all the different things that God told Moses, which then Moses told them to make. So we'll jump in. Again, I'm in my modern English version. You can be whatever version floats your boat. Although I would just make a plug here and say, if you're only reading something like the Passion Translation or the Message translation of the Bible, that's like reading a child's, comic book style Bible. There are some good points that are made in it. Some of the ideas are transferred, but it's not good enough to actually do some study on. Okay, you need to make sure that. I'm not saying you didn't hear me say never read those things.
The Message is a lot of kind of paraphrasing.
It is. And that's why I said don't only read those translations. I didn't say never read them. I'll read them too, because sometimes it's like, he did a good job of kind of, I'm going to transform this paragraph into something people can understand.
I've been told mostly good things about the Message, but some cautionary statements. Sometimes it's a little...
Well, one of the things, I'm going to go into this just for a second here, is I was watching something recently, and it was talking about that they were trying to make a translation for like the Aleuts, like the Eskimo people, and the people up in the Arctic Circle. And instead of trying to, like we're doing, let's break down what was going on back then, they're trying to change the Bible and bring it to today. And what they're doing is instead of saying that there's a flock of 99 sheep, 100 sheep and one goes, so he leaves 99 to go get the one sheep. They're like, well, these Eskimos don't know what a sheep is. So we're going to say sea lions instead, or seals or something. Like, now you're just getting further and further, like, you shouldn't be trying to make the Bible fit them. You should help them understand the Bible, right? And so I think you just start getting carried away with kind of these translations. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. All right.
You know where we get the word kid from? You know how we got kids? Is a baby goat.
Yeah, from goats. Yep. You're not kidding.
Oh.
Yeah, where I grew up, that was a big no-no. You could not call your children kids.
Really?
Oh, really?
Really?
Where were you from?
Like the Mennonite background, my church
Ah.
wasn't allowed. Like that was
What'd you have to say?
children.
Just children?
Yeah.
Wow.
You couldn't.
My uncle was like the
It's
preacher, and
actually
he was a big proponent of that. And then another word, as a teenager, like that he had conversations with me about it, was the word guy. Yeah, because he had researched it, and it comes from England. It meant a bad person, right? Whatever it meant back in the day, right? It was a surname for somebody who'd been in jail, that type of thing. So and I'm like, dude, it doesn't mean that nowadays, right?
Right.
It's all relative. Right?
I feel like you're really doing some legalistic
Yes.
gymnastics.
Oh, very, very
Back in
legalistic.
13, but it's 2022, so...
Very legalistic.
I don't play those games particularly. Although words do matter,
Yeah.
and we've covered words here before, but I don't play those type of games, or I try not to, unless I'm messing with my kids. I will do that with my children. All right, so here we are, chapter 38, and I'm going to start reading, and then we're going to go through this together. So, he made the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood. And who's he? Well, he's talking about Aholiab and Bezalel. Remember the 2 guys that he were called out? These are the craftsmen. So he made the altar of burnt offering of acacia wood. It was 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. It was square. And 5 cubits is, if you're curious, is about 4.5 feet, 4.5 to 5 feet. So about the size of like a breakfast table. Okay, so let's just say 5 feet by 5 feet, and 3 cubits high. So if 2 cubits is 36 inches, so about 42 inches high-ish, somewhere in there. So about here. And, kind of a box kind of looks like, do you know what a gaylord is? That's a weird word for our modern times, but a gaylord is,
Meet the parent.
yes, but a gaylord is actually a thing, and what it is, and when I tell you, you're going to know exactly what I mean. It's on a pallet, and it is normally has 4 sides, and you put stuff inside of it. So if you've ever gone to Walmart or Target or whatever, and they have all the pillows in this thing in the middle of the aisle, and you've seen them like wheeling in, that's a gaylord. That's what those things are called.
Whoa, the thing holding the pillows is a gaylord? The thing in the store is a gaylord?
Mm-hmm. I don't know why. That's just what it's called. So anyway, it's about those dimensions. Can you picture it now? Can you picture now about the dimensions?
Sir, you work in front of them. Where's the gaylord? Where's the gaylord?
You're gathering the dimensions now of what a gaylord is? Okay. Oh, man. All right, so he made its horns for its 4 corners. The horns were part of the same piece, and he overlaid it with bronze. He made all utensils of the altar and pots and shovels and the basins and flesh hooks and the fire pans. Now, this is the altar of burnt offering. So he made it all with like one piece of wood, and then he bent the bronze around it. Yeah, so he bent the bronze around it. Now, why would he use bronze and not gold here?
Well, structurally, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Some more structure, and gold has a lower melting point.
Well, gold's soft. You don't want a 24-karat cold green.
No, it's too soft.
Yeah.
So gold has a lower melting point. Gold's heavier. Yeah, it's a weird metal. It's heavier than bronze, but it's soft. And it has a lower melting point. So that means bronze melts at, I don't know what the name is, let's say 1,000 degrees. Well, gold will melt at 350 or whatever it is, right? So when you have that, if I'm going to have a fire going, I'm going to be burning animals all day for sacrifice. I don't want something that's going to have a low melt point. So when God created these plans for the Israelites, he knew what he had created as far as the elements of the metals were concerned. And so he said, make this burnt altar piece out of bronze. And that's why he told them that.
And that's why I don't buy cigarette lighters. No, they melt.
How many cigarette lighters of other metals are you buying? Okay. And I called your bluff. Nice. So he made all the utensils of the altar, the pots, the shovels, and the basins, the flesh hooks, and the fire pans. Sounds like a barbecue pit to me. Okay? And he made all its utensils of bronze, again, because it has a higher melting point than the gold. And silver has a lower melting point than bronze, too. Like, it doesn't take as much. You can use like one of those little propane torches and just run that torch on there. It'll melt silver as well. He made for the altar a bronze grating, a network beneath under its ledge, reaching halfway up. And he cast 4 rings for the 4 ends of the bronze grating to provide places for the poles. And he made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. And he put the poles into the rings on the side of the altar with which to carry it. And he made the altar hollow out of boards. So what we're seeing is he made it kind of around the sides, and it's hollow. And the reason you would make it hollow, per the instructions of God, is so that you have the fire underneath. When you put a slab of meat up there to either burn it till it's completely burnt away, or to cook it because y'all are going to eat it and celebrate together the sacrifice that was made for you. Either way, you're going to have stuff falling through. And so if you have a closed bottom on there, eventually it's going to fill up. And you're going to have to just figure out how to empty that thing out. When it's open, hollow, and it's just the sides and then the grating on the top, then you can take the poles and you can just pick it up. All right, guys, move it over 5 feet. So now we have more space. We can build a new fire underneath or whatever, and I don't have to worry about cleaning up the mess underneath there. Now, that is one of the things that I want to point out for tonight is the sin offering, the burnt offering. So remember we talked about this a little bit. It's like, okay, Bradford's got 2 goats this week. Holy macaroni. Like, Scott's only got a pigeon and a dove. And Brad's got an ox, and they're like, dang, Brad, what'd you do? You know, whatever, right? We talked about, it's recognizing sin.
Brad must have calmed down. I don't know.
Only one ox.
This week.
Only one ox. And so you imagine that animal, you know, you kill it, and then you, depending on what the prescription for that sin is that God gives them, you either burn it completely away until there's nothing left that's edible or usable, or you burn certain parts of it and then you eat other parts of it as a celebration of that animal sacrificed for your sins.
The priest, they got the choice.
Yeah, that was part of the Levitical, the Levites. They actually got the choice cuts because they didn't have land. They worked in the temple and in the synagogues, and so that was their kind of pay, right? So the thing is, though, is once you're done with that, when you say, hey, God, thank you so much for paying the price for my sin, there is something that's left, though, and that's the natural consequence of your sin. The spiritual aspect has been taken care of, but there is a natural residue left over from your sin. For example, let's say that I'm going to go, I'm going to go down Ella over here, and I'm going to speed, and every once in a while, a policeman sits down there. Did you say they planted all these oak trees? That's really nice. The county planted oak trees in the middle of the road. It's awesome. Yeah, just showed up last week. Yeah, we paid for them. Yes, of course. So thank myself. You know, pat myself on the back.
The speeding ticket paid for it.
The speeding ticket paid for it. So let's just say I got the speeding ticket, right? And he pulls me over and he's like, hey, you know, sign here, et cetera, et cetera. You can do defensive driving. You can just pay the ticket or whatever. Now, I say, you know what, Lord? I broke the law of the land. I sped above the limit that was posted. I did it willingly. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And 1 John 1:9 says God is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins when we confess them to him and repent and turn away from that sin. Okay? So spiritually, we're good to go. We're back with God. No problems, no issues there, right? But there's this residue, this residual natural consequence that now I still have to go pay the ticket, or I've got to go to defensive driving, or get deferred adjudication, or whatever the case is, right? There's still that residual. So even though they celebrated these sacrifices that were taking the place of their eternal sin for whatever they were sacrificing for, there was still this idea that there was this residue left over that had to be dealt with in a physical way. And then to shovel this stuff out or whatever the case is. So I just want you to think through, not just like they sacrifice, so yay us, we're free. And then, think like Bradford. Like Bradford says, Lord, forgive me for this. And then literally 15 seconds later, he's like, I'm doing this again, So it's like, Lord, forgive me again. Lord, forgive me again. Lord, forgive me again.
To use the word repent. To repent means to bust a 180. But
It does.
Say you might, I might repeat this the next day or so. Like, is that really repenting?
That's not repenting.
Exactly. So that's, I hate to make us say, I'm repenting, but if you're doing it again in a couple hours, and you're not.
But asking for forgiveness is not the same as repenting either. Asking for forgiveness is just saying, I recognize that this doesn't line up with your will, God. And I have remorse. I feel bad over that sin that doesn't line up with what you would have me have for my life, or it goes against your law that you have in the Bible, whatever the case is. Now, you could ask for that forgiveness, and you could be like, but I'm sure going to do it again tomorrow. Like, you could definitely do that and not repent, and that's what we would call a habitual sin, right? And pornography is a good one to point out for that, or drinking. If you're, having a beer is not a problem, but if you're an alcoholic or a drug,
trying to quit cursing, First step you can do is catch yourself. You got to catch yourself doing it.
Correct. And that is the point where you're saying, I recognize my sin.
I'm not intentionally, but I might cuss too much. I'm not trying to do that.
I recognize it, right? I recognize it. All right. So we understand the difference why he chose bronze for the burnt altar. I mean, that makes sense. So let's go to verse 8. He made the basin of bronze with its base of bronze from the mirrors of the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. What does that mean? Check it out. They didn't have glass like we have glass. They didn't take sand and silica and dioxide or whatever the bauxite or whatever the chemicals are and make glass like we have glass. they polished the metal. They polished the metal. And so bronze,
Mirrors weren't glass.
they weren't
They were
glass.
shiny metal.
They were shiny metal.
Right, that makes sense now.
And so they're literally saying that the women who were serving at the entrance of the tent, and I'm going to go on a hunch here. This is not in the Bible. It just says serving at the tent of meeting, right? But what I'm going to say is these are likely the wives of the guys who are working in the temple, working in the tabernacle. Likely. Okay. Because if your job is literally to be, I'm the high priest, and your wife's over there like, having mimosas, all day at brunch and not even going to church, it's going to be, well, wait a minute, So there's kind of this unspoken partnership that the wife is at least supporting your role, if not also participating in the role. And that's why you also see a lot of husbands and wives that are pastor teams or whatever. And it's not that the wife's preaching, but she is supporting the husband in that role, because for her to just not do anything there's nothing the Bible says she must do something. That's not it, but it's just this kind of unspoken. Does that make sense what I'm saying at all? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So these were the mirrors. So they must have gotten those from where? Home Depot.
Yeah.
From Egyptians. So they got fancy mirrors
Hey, I got a picture.
from the Egyptians, and they carried them all the way across the desert. And I did the calculations today. It was,
Egyptian mirror from that time.
oh, nice. Well, there you go. Yeah. So this is kind of a stand, and then they had a polished flat surface.
It wouldn't like the mirror we have today. It wasn't that good.
No. It would just give you like a basic.
Yeah.
It'd be like if you were squinting your eyes a lot and you kind of look in the mirror,
Yeah.
you'd still be better than what they're looking at.
The mirrors that we know today, what we call mirror today, was invented in 1825. What we know as a mirror.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's
They are,
awesome.
They're mirrors. They're not
Yeah. Now,
shiny metal. They're actual mirrors.
I can look in a puddle of water that's perfectly still, and I can see a reflection. So I know what I look like.
Yeah.
That's where the Greek mythology of Narcissus came from. He fell in love with his reflection.
Narcissus.
But it's not as good as the mirrors that we have currently, right? So there's different degrees. So in any case, I'm saying that this is likely from that exact mirror right there. And they then took that bronze and they just hammered it and flattened it out, or curved it up, into a bronze laver or a bronze basin so they could wash their hands. Because remember, I'm gonna draw this now because I want us to remember what we're talking about here. If you haven't, you can go to bradaflack.com/Exodus and see all the maps and diagrams and archaeology and all the other fun stuff on there. But if you'll remember here, we have the outer court, right? And the entrance is facing the east. Well, I say it, arrow's pointing that's the entrance. The arrow's facing the east. Then we have the inner court, which is the actual tent structure itself. And so here we've got the altar, right? Got the altar there. And then we have the bronze laver. That's to wash your hands. Okay. Got water in it. And so if you're coming from the place where you're sacrificing these animals.
Where are you doing that? The altar where you sacrifice?
Okay. The altar is where you sacrifice and you lay the animal on there. Before you can go into the presence of God, you got to wash your hands and probably wash your feet too to go into there. Because I can't bring the residue of that sin.
I guess if you just sacrifice them, you need to wash more than just your feet.
Yeah, probably washing most everything, right?
It's very symbolic.
So I have to wash off the rest of that residue. The penalty's been paid by that animal for that sin, but I still have to deal with it all the way to the end. Now, when we looked a couple of weeks ago at the symbolism of Jesus in this tabernacle, he did pay the price all the way to the end. And that's actually when he was on the cross, he said, "It is finished." And that in the Greek is actually the word that they would take a piece of paper and they would say, "All right, Scott, you owe me $150 for, a new bicycle." And so you give me all right, paid in full. Here you go. You're done. It's zeroed out. And so Jesus, when he said that, he said paid in full. So he literally encompassed both the sacrifice and the residue for that sin in that moment. Now, we are caught in this place where we are living in the spiritual world and we're living in the physical world. Okay, last I checked, I eat, I go to the bathroom, I sleep, I work out, I crash, whatever the case is, right? So we have a physical world. We still have a spiritual world too. In the spiritual world, we have that sacrifice has been taken care of. So that's good. But because we're still in the physical world, we still are living in that residual leftover of having to deal with the effects of sin. Okay? So that's why when someone calls you to a Christian life, they're not saying, be holy so people see how cool you are, or be holy so God's really proud of you like you've done something amazing, right? What they're really saying is, these sins have been taken care of, but if you can live a more righteous lifestyle, you will have less residue of that sin in the physical world that you have to deal with. Does that make sense? I'm going to say it one more time. Your spiritual side has been taken care of, but because we're still in the flesh here on earth, we still have to deal with the effects of our sins here. God will forgive Bernie Madoff, or whatever his name is, for taking millions and millions of dollars from people. God can forgive him for that, like that.
I think marriage is a big thing. Like, yes, God will forgive you for whatever you do to your spouse or if you cheat on her, but that fallout
Great
may
example.
affect the rest of your life.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so even like my deal, like God will forgive him for that pyramid scheme, but he's got to serve the time or pay it back or whatever. He's got that residual that's left over. Okay. All right. Let's continue on here. So the women are providing for the bronze, and let's go to verse 9. He made the courtyard on the south side toward the hangings of the courtyard were of fine twisted linen, 100 cubits. That's 150 feet. Their 20 pillars and 20 bases were of bronze. So these pillars here on the south, there's 20 of them across here. So if it's 150 foot long divided by 20, that means that they're about 7.5 feet. About 7.5 feet apart. And it's going to tell us in a minute, it's about 7.5 feet tall. This curtain, this wall around the outside. Okay? Now, I'm 6 foot and just a hair. If
You can't say that. You can't say just a hair.
because I've lost all my hair. So probably without my hair, I'm probably right at 6 foot. But I am what I would call slightly above average height. I'm not crazy tall, but I'm definitely taller than the average American male. That being said, the people, and you probably know this, Chris, more than I do, but the average ancient person in the Near East is probably closer to 5'5" for the 5'4" to 5'5" in their average.
And they were 5'1" to 5'4".
Oh, 5'1" to 5'4". Okay, so they're even smaller, right? So 5'1" to 5'4" is even smaller. So a 7.5 foot fence around the outside is more than plenty to block out the prying eyes of those who would want to see in. And it's not because they can't participate, but it's to create a sanctuary, a place that's set aside and holy just for this activity. And so I want us to point that out, that the kind of what the dimensions are. So these blocks, there's 20, so 7.5 foot, which is probably right about there maybe, 7.5 foot by 7.5 foot. So there's that square, there's 20 of them, and that's what makes this south side. It's going to tell us in a minute, that's also the length of the north side. So those little squares, 7.5 by 7.5, all the way down, 20 of them. Okay, it's 150 foot long. And the pillars, it says, the base were bronze. Their 20 bases were of bronze. It's going to be rust and corrosion resistant, and it's going to be weighty without being costly. Okay, so it's going to be something that they can kind of anchor in each of those places. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver, more decorative. For the north side, the hangings were 100 cubits, 150 foot. Their 20 pillars and 20 sockets were of bronze, and the hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. For the west side, over here, it was 75 feet, 50 cubits, with their 10 pillars. So he's got 10 going across here. So that means on that side, if it's 75 feet and there's 10, 7.5, right? So we're keeping the same dimensions, 7.5 by 7.5 squares. There's 10 of them across the back, with their 10 pillars and the 10 sockets. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver. For the east side, 50 cubits, 75 feet. So we've got a rectangle now, 75, 75, 150, 150. Okay. The hangings on one side of the gate were 15 cubits, or 22.5 feet, with their 3 pillars and 3 sockets. So 3 pillars and 22.5 feet is rough, but if I'm doing 7.5 times 3, that's going to put me at about 22.5 feet. So here we're still doing these 7.5 by 7.5 rectangle or squares through here. So there's going to be 3 of those through here, 3 pillars and 3 sockets, and for the other side of the court gate. All right, so 22.5 and 22.5 gets us 45 feet. How many feet was it across here? 75. So we've got 30 feet in the middle for the entrance. So let's see if that math works out. On both sides of the courtyard, the hangings were 22.5 feet cubits with 3 pillars and 3 sockets. All the hangings of the courtyard all around were of fine twisted linen. The sockets for the pillars were of bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver, and the overlaying of their tops of silver. And all the pillars of the courtyard were furnished with silver bands. So they're very decorative. All right. The screen for the gate up here was embroidered of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twisted linen. Its length was 20 cubits, or about 30 feet. So the math checks out, okay? And its height was how high? 7.5 feet. So everything's matching up. I mean, this math makes total sense, okay? And its height was 7.5, corresponding to the hangings of the courtyard. There are 4 pillars. So there was 4 pillars for 30 feet. So if you do that math, what's 4 divided by 7.5? Or 4 times 7.5 is about 30 feet. So we're still keeping with the same motif, right? The hooks and their bands were of silver, and the overlaying of the tops of bands were of silver. All the tent pegs of the tabernacle and of the courtyard all around were bronze. And again, you're pulling down these tent stakes to hold the ropes. You know, if you're going to have a rope going across, and Chris had brought the drawing for us, and it's on the website too. You go to bradflight.com/Exodus, but there's not 20 of them, but they've got ropes on both sides, and then they're held in with these bronze stakes as well. So this thing is very imposing, as far as if I'm in the desert and I'm going to go and I see this white linen with decorations all on it, brightly colored, 7.5 foot tall, and you can see the people walking. So like if it's, let's just say the top of this thing right here for grins and giggles is 7.5 foot. So you can see all the short people, they're shorter than me, so they're all like walking like right here, and they're all walking around in front of and around this thing, and you're looking at it from a distance. This looks like an imposing wall. Okay? So this is, and it's colored where it doesn't camouflage with the background. Remember what color the ram skins were dyed? Red.
Yeah.
Red. So we have this thing.
It tells you also about God's decor. He loves colorful things,
Yeah.
man. He also loves sweet smelling things.
That's right.
The incense has to always be
Thanks, Bradford.
But it gives us an insight on what God loves.
I need to get a better easel one day. So the deal is if this is what you see, and then there's people, like I say, walking around outside of it, and this is kind of white with decorations of fine scarlet and purple and blue and whatever, and then you see this kind of red thing sticking up above. You're thinking to yourself, what is going on in there? that doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in the desert before. This has got to be something.
Probably very attractive.
Yeah. What is this thing? And very attractive is probably a really good way to put it, because people have difficulty interacting with God when they see the ugly side of their sin. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine who I went to high school with, I've talking with him about salvation stuff, and I maybe have shared this with you guys in the past. He's having a hard time because he's like, I can get with you to like 85% of the way there. The last 15%, though, is how is a good God allowing my wife to be sexually assaulted by her father when she was growing up?
They always go there.
That kind of stuff. And he can't get there. But God, he wants to attract you to him, not try to answer every single one of your questions. Not that he won't answer your questions, but the point is not to make it about what you have. It's what he has. Do you get what I'm trying to say at all? This is not about you. This is about what the Israelites did. They didn't save themselves. They were enslaved, right? God set them free. Well, then they were trapped against the Red Sea. God set them free. Then they didn't have any water. God gave them water. You see this pattern on and on? And we continue to say to ourselves, well, what about the good people who do good things? But, yeah, I mean, they have sin, but like they're still good people. How can they be judged the same as Marilyn Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, whoever? Not Marilyn Manson. What's his name? Charles Manson. Sorry. And maybe Marilyn Manson. I don't know.
Not to hate him.
I know. But my whole point is saying, instead of focusing on ourselves, what should the focus be on? And if you make this place beautiful and intriguing and attractive, they're going to say, man, I don't know what's happening in there, but I got to check this thing out. Okay? Now, this is pre-Pentecost. When you're talking about Pentecost, which we talked about back in Easter time, Pentecost means the Holy Spirit lives within us. And so the place where God dwells is now you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and you. And so what that means is we are the ones then that God will utilize to attract people to himself through us.
The Christian, I've been told, the Christian individual is the Ark of the Covenant.
That's right. Which is,
That's a big deal.
that's both humbling and kind of scaring. It's kind of scary. That's a great weight that we have been given. And it's not of our own. It's a great weight when we say, well, I've got to carry this thing. And Jesus goes, no. I'm going to do that. You just go and do what I tell you to do. When we try to do it, we're going to struggle. We're going to lose energy. We're going to lose motivation. We're going to burn out. When we say, you know what? Take me, whatever you think. You want me to go? I'll go there. You want me to talk to that guy? I'll talk to that guy. You want me to give that money? I'll give that money. Then we feel energized. We feel filled up. We feel joy because we're being used by God. So we're talking about the tabernacle. All right, so let's go to, where were we? Verse 21. All right, verse 21, chapter 38. This is the inventory of the tabernacle. The tabernacle of testimony, as it was counted according to the commandment of Moses for the service of the Levites by the hand of Ithamar, son of Aaron, and the priest. Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that the Lord commanded Moses. With him was Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, an engraver and designer, an embroiderer in blue and purple and scarlet yarns, and fine linen. All the gold that was used for the work, and all the work of the sanctuary, even the gold of the wave offering, was 29 talents and 730 shekels. So let's go into that for a second. A talent is about 75 pounds. And a shekel is about 2/5 or 0.4 ounces. So what they're saying is we didn't have we didn't have pounds and ounces. We have talents and shekels. But think about them as pounds and ounces. And I've done the math for us. So it says here, 29 talents, 730 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. So what that means is we have 2,193.25 pounds of gold. It's basically right at a ton. Okay? A ton of gold. And in today's market value, I looked it up today, just to make sure it was accurate. In today's market value, that would be valued at $63,650,922.36. This is what was used to make this. For the gold parts. Okay? For the gold parts. Let's continue. Verse 25. The silver of those who were numbered of the congregation was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. So that adds up to 7,544.375 pounds of silver. Almost 2 tons, And the value today, silver is less than gold, but the value today in that is $2,592,211.04. So we're sitting at $66 million worth of gold and silver.
Wow. And if that's just the gold value, if you could put a archaeological price on there.
Right.
It'd be billions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like if they were to find this stuff,
Oh, yeah.
it would be millions.
Yeah.
I'd be committing sin just to go see the place every day.
A beka for every man, that is half a shekel, according to the shekel of the sanctuary for everyone who is numbered from 20 years old and upward. So here's the deal. For 20-year-old and up, they had to bring an offering. Okay, and it was a beka. And it was 1/5 of an ounce of silver, which is 0.2 ounces of silver. So for 603,550 men, they brought the 100 talents of silver for casting the sockets of the sanctuary and the sockets of the veil, 100 sockets of 100 talents, a talent for a socket. Of the 1,775 shekels, he made hooks for the pillars and overlaid their tops and made bands for them. I mean, this thing is decadent. The bronze of the wave offering was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels, which is the equivalent of 5,310 pounds of bronze. And I couldn't find a market value for a new bronze, so I found the scrap price, which is going to be the lowball price, right? The scrap price of 5,310 pounds of bronze is $13,275 in bronze, which is not a very precious metal, but it's very useful, but it's not very precious metal, right? So, with it, he made the sockets for the door of the tent of meeting and bronze altar and its bronze grating and all the utensils of the altar and all the sockets of all the courtyard all around and the sockets of the courtyard gate and all the tent pegs of the tabernacle and all the tent pegs of the courtyard all around. So, when you add this all up, we end up with 15,047.625 pounds of metal for this structure. 15,000 pounds of metal for this structure. Now, you were talking about how many people help. That makes a lot more sense when you've got thousands of people helping carry this thing.
I read that again. I don't think it was 15. I think it was more like 10,000, but it was still a big number.
Yeah. A lot of metal in it. And I thought to myself, well, remember in the very beginning of Exodus, we said there was between probably 1 and 3 million Israelites that came out of Egypt. So I took that number, 15,000 pounds of metal, just metal. I'm not even talking about porpoise skins and all the other things that we've been talking about. If you divide it by 1 million people, each person has to carry 0.015 pounds. To put that in perspective, 1 ounce is 0.06 pounds. So 0.015 pounds is not a lot.
Here's an interesting part. I wish there was more information about when the Egyptians were giving all this to Israel.
Yeah.
We're talking tonnage.
Yes. Yes, 15,000 pounds of metal, 10 to 15,000, whatever it is, of metal.
They must have taken
They took everything.
a month for everybody to come and give all that.
I don't know. I don't understand. Yeah. Now that we're,
Doesn't move.
but if you and I, if us, a couple of guys in the room are trying to move it, yeah, it's going to take us a long time. But we're talking 1 to 3 million people. And if all of them are carrying less than an ounce of metal, because I didn't even break it down into gold, I just said metals, plural. If everyone's carrying less than an ounce of metal and it adds up to this, then there's no sweat on anyone's back. On the average. I mean, I'm sure there were some people carrying more and others carried none. Or whatever.
This price of it had no metal.
Right.
Kids, women, children, all that.
Right.
Even if it was just 10,000 men that were carrying that, that would be 1.5 pounds per person.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the shoes weigh 1.5 pounds.
Right.
It's really nothing.
Yeah. If you broke it down that way. Now, we talked about each of the poles has bronze in it. Each of the poles has gold in it. Each of the poles has silver in it. So each of these posts, columns, the 20 here and the 20 here and the 10 here and the 10 here. You've got, what is that, 60 columns or 60 posts. They were 12 foot tall. Remember we talked about that. They were 12 foot tall. And they are made of acacia wood covered with all these metals. It probably took 2 or 3 guys to carry each one of those. I mean, minimum.
Can you say that the weave was like really thick?
Yes. Yeah. Very thick weave. This is not fancy, quick dry, cool, go out and get sweaty, but you'll dry by the time you get back to the car material. This is like thick, woven linen material. Have you ever dealt with one of those old army tents that you could like roll up the sides, that canvas stuff? That weight adds up fast on those things. And this material had to be at least that thickness or more.
And the people were smaller back then, so they couldn't carry as much weight.
But like he mentioned in Numbers, they were talking about how many people were involved in the tabernacle.
There's also oxen and wagons they use.
They'd have to.
They'd have to. I mean, look at
Bulls, donkeys.
Look at about all the weights that we're talking about. 15,000 pounds of metal.
Yeah, it says that the Gershonites had 2 wagons and 4 oxen. The Merarites had 4 wagons and 8 oxen. But
And where is this? Where is this?
number 7.
Number 7. Okay.
The Kohathite division had none because they were required to carry the sacred objects of the tabernacle on their shoulders. So I guess the tent itself you could haul.
Yeah, but like this, you have to have the poles.
Yeah.
So you
That you had to
have to have
carry
4
on your
guys. 4 guys.
I still don't see how 4 guys can carry that. It just seems heavy.
Well, you're a bodybuilder. You could carry it.
They're 5'1".
But if you have long enough poles, you could get like 8 guys on there.
Yeah, if they're long enough poles, you could put 8 guys in there.
I
That's a
guess
good
we're
point.
just assuming it was 4.
We're assuming it's 4. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, remember we talked about the size of what a Gaylord was, right? And for this, and it's wood, and then it's covered in bronze. It's going to be heavy. It ain't going to be no light,
Well, when they're moving through the desert, everything sinks.
And they're moving through the desert, walking. Every step is 3 steps because you're,
Rolling your ankles.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I could do it. And I'm a hiker. I hiked 100 miles in a week.
They must have had some serious chads walking.
They boom. Yeah, All right, so let's go to chapter 39 now. Now from the blue, purple, and scarlet they made woven garments for serving in the holy place. Remember the holy garments for the priests? We talked about God gave those commandments. Now he gave them to the people, and now they're actually making them. And for serving in the holy place, and made the holy garments for Aaron, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Yep. He made the ephod. Remember that thing that covers over top with it's going to have the stones and stuff on it. We'll talk about it in a second. Of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine twisted linen. Then they hammered the gold into thin sheets and cut it into threads to work them into the blue, the purple, the scarlet, and the fine linen with skillful work. So for his garments, they included gold thread woven. They have purple, scarlet, and blue with white, and then they put gold thread, and that's what they wove it all together. It'd be like your shirt kind of has different colored, modeled colors and whatever, but like a gold thread's one of them. That's pretty bad to the bone.
Yeah.
I mean, this is lavish, decadent, right? But here's the deal. If it was up to the Israelites and he just said, okay, open the gate. Y'all guys, all right, you're free. Just go. How many of them would have left? Some, but not all of them. And how much would have taken with them? Whatever they had on. But God said, that's not the way we're doing this. I am going to make it where everybody wants to leave with me. And on the way out, I'm going to make it where you have all that you need to make a place to worship me. Again, God did it for them. They didn't do it for themselves. If they were left to themselves, they would have just stayed there in Egypt and been slaves. Right? It all comes back to God is the one who's driving this. He's the one doing this. And he's doing it because he wants the Israelites to see him, and he wants them to turn around and be like, wow, God, this has all happened really fast, but you really have done an amazing thing. Like all this, the past couple of months have just been, wow.
I think I would have been told on plagues.
Yeah.
That would have done it for me right there.
And remember, all that we're talking about here, again, I kind of did a map. I used Google and I kind of did the measurement thing, and it was about 350 miles from where they were to where they are now. 350 miles.
So that's what, 6 weeks?
At least.
No, travel.
Yeah. 350 miles carrying all that stuff. And God knew how much they were going to need, and above and beyond. He provided above and beyond their needs. Because remember, the workers were like, all right, time out. We got enough stuff. I don't need any more porpoise skins. I got enough. They had more than they needed because God's the one who provided for it. They didn't provide for themselves. When we provide for ourselves, we have to go back again. And we got to go back again. And we got to go back. I got to go back to work. I got to go back to work.
Was in charge of estimating the logistics that they needed for that, it would have been so screwed up.
Oh, no, it would never have worked.
Like Putin, it's so screwed up. He miscalculated everything. They ran out of food, they ran out of water,
Yeah.
they ran out of fuel.
Yeah.
And I could see that happening, but with God, it was just, there's no way else that could be
Nope.
perfect.
It couldn't be this without him.
No, that was too precise.
Verse 4, they made shoulder pieces for it and attached it together, which you can go back and look at pictures on the website there, bradflight.com/Exodus, in order to attach it together, and it was joined by the two edges together. The skillfully woven waistband of his ephod that was on it was like it, of the same material of gold, blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twisted linen, just as the Lord commanded Moses. And they set the onyx stones on the closed-in gold filigree settings that were engraved like the engravings of a signet, according to the names of the children of Israel. And he put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be stones for a memorial to the children of Israel, just as the Lord commanded Moses. I got pictures of all that. You can go back and look. All right. Making the breastplate. The breastplate, the work of a skillful workman, like the workmanship of the ephod, of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet, and fine twisted linen. It was square, and they made the breastplate folded double, a span long and a span wide when doubled. They set it in 4 rows of stones. A row of sardius, topaz, and carbuncle was the first row. The second row, an emerald, sapphire, and diamond. The third row, a jacinth, agate, and amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. And I've got pictures of what the stones possibly were. It's lost in translation a little bit what some of those meant. because, like, for example, diamonds, you can have pink diamonds, you can have yellow diamonds, so we don't know exactly what color they meant when they said that, but I've got examples.
What's that onyx?
Onyx is black. It's a black stone. Yeah. And so you can go back to bradflight.com/Exodus and go back to chapter 23, 24, 25, somewhere back there, and see the pictures of what it would look like. Okay. Let's see here. They were enclosed in settings of gold filigree, and the stones were corresponding to the names of the children of Israel. 12 corresponding to their names, like the engravings of a signet, each with its name, corresponding to the 12 tribes. They made on the breastplate braided chains like cords of pure gold, and they made 2 gold filigree settings and 2 gold rings, and put 2 rings in the 2 ends of the breastplate. They put 2 braided chains of gold in the 2 rings on the ends of the breastplate. You can see all of it. It's on the website. You can go look at it, what the pictures are. The other 2 ends of the braided chains they fastened in the 2 filigree settings and put them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod at the front of it. And they made 2 rings of gold and put them on the 2 ends of the breastplate on the edge of it, which was on the inner side of the ephod. And they made 2 other gold rings and put them on the 2 sides of the ephod underneath toward the front of it, over against where it was joined, above the waistband of the ephod. They bound the breastplate by its rings to the rings of the ephod with a blue cord, so that it might be above the waistband of the ephod. That the breastplate might not come loose from the ephod, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Remember that last part? They put the little gold rings on the side, and then they put a tie on there, because if he's bending over, cutting the neck of a goat or whatever, they don't want this thing flapping around. So it was to keep it tied tight against his body. So again, there's more pictures and videos of all of that stuff that was described there on the website. You can go back and look at it. My question to you is, why? We talked about last week, why do we have the tabernacle? Why do we need fancy clothing to be the representative of God? Why do we need fancy clothing to be a priest or a minister? Not today, but I'm saying, like, why is this important? Why are we jumping through these hoops?
I think it comes into an honorable position to hold.
That's true.
Also, I think they were trying to build like a community. Everybody was working together for a common, goal. And, it always works better when everybody comes together and works as a team. And,
Yeah. I also think that perhaps God planned it out, and they were like, wait, it's going to have this and this and this and this. How's that going to work? And so that I think when they finally put it together, we're like, man, this looks good. This looks awesome. This is amazing. Where if left to their own, Bradford would choose to wear his shoes that have the heels that slip on, right? Where Mr. Mike, he's going to wear his Crocs, and Gary's going to wear his flip-flops. But God said, no, you're not going to do that. I want you to wear this. This is what I want you to do. And remember, I said the inside of the entire tabernacle, the inside of this tent, looks just like the priestly garments. And I think what it is supposed to be that snapshot glimpse of this is what heaven's going to be like.
Heavenly stuff,
Yeah, this is what, especially to somebody who is coming through the desert,
Right.
wearing the same clothes they've been wearing for who knows how long,
40 years.
And so you end up with, like, this becomes the place. This becomes the spot. Because everyone's tense, they got sweat stains, and they got, donkey peed on the corner, or whatever the case is. You got all these things. But this is the place. And they understand. They didn't go and work to get 15,000 pounds of metal. But they're not dumb either. They understand the sunk value of this thing. This becomes, I have to grasp mentally what we have here. Why would I have something that's worth millions and millions of dollars in today's terms, or whatever back then? Let's just call it thousands and thousands of dollars back then, whatever. But it doesn't matter. I have this thing that's worth all this stuff, and I don't care what goes on there. I don't care what happens there. I don't ever go and check it out. I don't ever go visit. I don't ever do anything. Like, that doesn't make sense. I'm in the middle of the desert. It's not like we're going to hang out at the In-N-Out. You know what I'm saying? Like, where else am I going to go? So this becomes the place.
It adds value.
It all adds value. All of it does. So verse 22. Then he made the robe of the ephod of woven work, all of blue, but there was an opening in the middle of the robe, like the opening of a coat of mail, with a band all around the opening so that it should not be torn. They made on the hems of the robe pomegranates of blue, purple, and scarlet, and twisted fine linen. And they made bells of pure gold, and put the bells between the pomegranates all around the hem of the robe. There was a bell and a pomegranate, all around the hem of the robe to be used in the service, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Now, why would we have these little bells in here?
I don't know.
So, remember, how tall is this?
To let somebody know when they're coming or going.
Yeah, how tall is this?
7.5.
7.5 feet. And how many million people did we say? Between 1 and 3 million people. How many could fit in here? Not 1 million, right? Very limited people can go into this thing. But when you have the priest who's going through and doing these things on behalf of the people, they can't see inside of there, but they can hear on their behalf the movements and the actions of that priest going on. Where everyone shh, ring, 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 ring. Yes, he's doing this thing. He's taking that for me. He's taking that sin to God on my behalf. He's making it happen.
Bloody murder.
Yeah, but those bells will be ringing the whole time that he's moving around doing all that stuff. Like, yes, thank you. You took care of that one for me. Awesome. Right? Because I can't go in there. I'm not qualified to go in there. But I have one who went in there on my behalf. And that's what Jesus did. I'm not qualified to die on the cross for everybody's sins. But he did. And that's when we were like, yes. I don't understand it. I don't know how that works. Why you chose me. Why you chose Bradford. But you did. He chose every one of us. And he did it because he loves us. He could have easily said, yes, no, yes, right? But he didn't. He's like, for all of y'all, I'm going to do this thing. And all he asks in return is everything. Is everything. He took care of the hard part, the eternal part. What he's asking for is, now that we have gained access into here through this sacrifice, remember that Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat? You don't get what you do deserve so that God can be with you here. We have access through Jesus all the way to that mercy seat. He says, I paid everything for you, and what I want from you is everything. Just bring it all right here. I want to be with you. Right here. I took care of this. I took care of that. I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of mankind. You see? I took care of it. I want you here. Quit putting hurdles in front of it. Quit making things up. Quit adding to what the Bible says. I took care of it, Jesus says. I made the way for you. They made tunics of finely woven linen for Aaron and his sons, and a turban of fine linen, and decorated caps of fine linen, and linen breeches of fine twisted linen. The sash was of fine twisted linen in blue, purple, and scarlet, the work of an embroiderer, just as the Lord commanded Moses. And they made the plate of the holy crown of pure gold, and they wrote on it an inscription like the engravings of a holy signet. It says, Holiness to the Lord. And that was facing outward from this person's head. That was basically saying, everything I'm doing here, I've got to remember that everything here is to reflect the holiness of the Lord. And they attached it to a blue cord and to fasten it to the turban above, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Thus all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting was finished. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so they did. They brought the tabernacle to Moses, the tent and all its furnishings, its clasps, its boards, its bars, and its pillars and its sockets, the covering of ram skin dyed red, and the covering of porpoise skins, and the screening veil between the holy place and the inner court, right? The ark of the testimony and its poles and the mercy seat, the table and all its utensils and the showbread, the pure gold lampstand with its arrangement of lamps and all its utensils, and the oil for the light, the gold altar and the anointing oil and the fragrant incense, and the curtain for the entrance to the tent, the bronze altar, its bronze grating, its poles and all its utensils, and basin and its stand, the hangings of the courtyards, its pillars and its sockets, and curtain for the courtyard gate, its cords and its pegs, and all utensils for the service of the tabernacle, for the tent of meeting, the woven garments of service to do service in the holy place, and the holy garments for Aaron the priest and his son's garments to minister as priests. And then here we are in Exodus 39, verse 42. The children of Israel did all the work according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. And Moses looked over all the work, and indeed they had done it. As the Lord had commanded, so they had done. Then Moses blessed them. Now, I want to make a correlation here. In verse 42, I'm going to use Brad's translation. I'm going to see if you catch what I'm trying to make a connection to here. Moses looked over all the work, and indeed they had done it, as the Lord commanded. So Moses looked over all the work, and he saw that it was good. What does that connect to? Yes.
Creation.
The creation story. What did they just create?
The tabernacle.
The tabernacle. They've just created a microcosm, a dot on the map of heaven. God created the heavens and the earth, right? 6 days, and the seventh day he rested, and he saw it was good. He saw it was good. He saw it was good. They made one tiny little place, and Moses said, "We did it, guys. Good job." They made a dot on the map. They made a tent. God said, "Let there be light." Click. Flip on the light switch. They wove stuff together. And I would love to see it. You know, I'm not saying it's not fantastic. It's elaborate, but it's only as much as the humans can do,
Well, yeah.
right?
Imagine how hot it is.
Oh man, inside of there. Oh man,
Is he humid in that part of the world?
no, it's dry.
Good. I'm all living in
Yeah.
Egypt. It's the same temperature as Houston. It's like dry.
No, over
Way
yeah,
better,
it's
way better.
very dry.
Way.
So,
way-
My whole point is, they did it to God's specifications, but it's still only as good as they could do. So Moses said, "You guys follow the instructions. You know, you went to IKEA and you put it together, and it didn't fall apart. Good job, guys." But it's not the same as God doing it. But he wanted, like you said, community. He wanted them to have buy-in. He wanted them to understand the sunk cost and value of every part that was in here, and to be emotionally attached to it. I mean, think about the weaver weaving, like, "Oh, I'll stab my finger again. You know, I'm weaving this thing. Yeah, we're making this for the tabernacle. This is awesome. Hey, I need some more scarlet thread. Bring that over here." You know, whatever, right? It's this whole thing that they did it together. They, again, didn't start it. Did they make the blueprints? No. All they did was follow the instructions. Okay? Next week, we're going to talk about what happens now that they're finished. They're finished constructing it. It's not up yet, okay? But they have put all the pieces together. Remember, it said they presented to him the tent, so it's like rolled up, like on the ox cart, like rolled up in the ox cart. And there's all this fabric rolled up. Hey, we got it. It's ready for you.
I looked at it.
No, they haven't put it together yet. Yeah. Next week.
They're not really 100%.
Next week, they're putting it together. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's Exodus chapter 40. We're going to finish this out with them looking at it and their reaction and what happens.
So, did Moses write all this on stone, or is this some of this bonding?
I think that he wrote it in cuneiform. That's just me. I think, because he can go.
He was doing those,
I couldn't imagine, and papyrus would not have lasted long enough. They talk about manuscripts being transcribed in the like first century, and the papyrus would last like 12 to 24 months or something like that before it just.
Well, it wouldn't be durable to travel with.
Yeah, you can't travel with it.
You know.
Yeah. So they would bury them. The old transcript, they didn't want to have multiple copies that people could start making their own or whatever. They were trying to protect the sanctity of the scriptures, and so they would bury the old pieces, and those would just become dust in the ground. So the ones that were saved in the Dead Sea, that was why that was such a big find, because we found so many that were so intact in Qumran. We actually found old pieces. They weren't deteriorated and buried. That's what they were doing. So anyway, glad you were here. I hope you learned something new. See you next week.